He acts distant, but he is hooked. 9 signs you're in his head. Carl Jung. Let's talk about something that silently eats at so many people in modern dating. That frustrating, disorienting, emotionally draining experience where someone you felt a real connection with starts to act distant. He doesn't message as much. He pulls back when things start getting deep. He goes from present to vague, warm to cold, and engaged to ghost, and you're left wondering what happened. It's confusing, right? You replay conversations in your head. You analyze the way he looked at you, the vibe between you, and the way his energy lingered even after he walked away. Something about it didn't feel fake. Something about it felt real. And yet, here he is, gone, quiet, withdrawn, different. Part of you wants to believe he just doesn't care. That would be easier. If he simply lost interest, at least you could close the door and move on. But what if that isn't the full truth? What if the distance isn't about you being unimportant, but about you mattering too much? See, one of the biggest misunderstandings in modern dating is the assumption that love, attraction, or emotional connection will always show up as effort, consistency, and romance. That if a man truly likes you, you'll know clearly, loudly, and frequently. But real emotions don't always behave that way, especially not in emotionally complex or avoidant men. Sometimes the depth of feeling doesn't result in pursuit, it results in panic. Because of real feelings, they can be terrifying. They awaken things in us that we haven't dealt with yet. Fear of vulnerability, fear of rejection, fear of being hurt, fear of not being enough, fear of being known. And when those fears get activated in a man, he doesn't lean in, he retreats. Not because he didn't feel anything, but because he did. Let that sink in. Imagine this. A man meets a woman who lights something up in him. Not just physical attraction, but something deeper. He starts to see her as someone with depth. Someone who sees him, not just his surface. It feels amazing, but suddenly he's not just in control anymore. Something is stirring, and it's scary. What's his instinct? To back up, to create distance, to feel safe again. This doesn't mean he's a bad person. It doesn't mean he's playing games. And it doesn't mean you're not enough. It means his emotions are louder than his emotional maturity. A man who's emotionally avoidant or underdeveloped in dealing with feelings will often withdraw the moment things start to feel real. He's not withdrawing because it wasn't real. He's withdrawing because it was. Let's be honest, many men aren't taught how to feel deep emotions. Society often tells them to man up, to stay stoic, to avoid being vulnerable. So when they finally feel something powerful and raw, they don't know what to do with it. It's like giving someone a book in a language they were never taught. They have no idea how to read it. And what's worse, you, on the receiving end, are often left internalizing this silence, blaming yourself, wondering what you did wrong, trying to decode the emotional whiplash of it all. One day he's deeply connected, texting first, sharing pieces of himself. The next day, he's gone, distant, unavailable. And you ask yourself, was any of it real? Yes, often it was. But he didn't have the tools to handle it. And when a man feels something that threatens his emotional comfort zone, his instinct is to pull back, not to lean in. Think about this. When someone touches a part of us that we've kept hidden, even from ourselves, it doesn't just stir up warmth, it stirs up fear. For many emotionally avoidant men, falling for someone doesn't feel like a soft landing. It feels like losing control. And to regain that control, they withdraw. This is why so many women experience the classic hot and cold behavior. It's not always manipulation. It's not necessarily intentional. It's often a reflection of internal conflict. The hot moments are real. The eye contact, the playful banter, the vulnerability. In those moments, he's letting his guard down, but when the reality of those feelings sets in, when it starts to feel like something real is forming, his inner alarm goes off. This is too much. She matters too much. If she matters, she could hurt me. And suddenly, the cold sets in. That push-pull dynamic can drive you insane because it makes you doubt your instincts. It causes emotional chaos. You felt the connection. It meant something. And yet, his behavior says the opposite. How do you reconcile that? The key is to see the behavior clearly without personalizing it. Just because a man goes distant doesn't mean he's over you. Just because he isn't showing up the way you need doesn't mean you're not in his head. Sometimes, the silence is the loudest sign that you awakened something in him. He's not gone because he didn't care. He's gone because he did. Now, does that mean you should wait around for him to come back? No. Understanding emotional conflict doesn't mean tolerating emotional inconsistency, but it does mean learning to internalize it. Because here's the truth. Inconsistent behavior isn't always about you. It's about him, his capacity, his readiness, his emotional bandwidth. Some people aren't ready for what they feel. They want connection, but they're afraid of the cost. They crave intimacy, but haven't done the internal work to hold it, so they orbit you. They hover, they show up, disappear, and reappear. And you're left dancing with ghosts, trying to prove your worth to someone who's still trying to prove something to himself. So what do? You stop trying to decode his distance. You stop chasing clarity from someone who hasn't even given it to himself. You hold your ground. You focus on your energy. You protect your peace. Because when you know your worth, you don't beg to be chosen. You choose you. So let's come back to you. You've experienced the pullback. You've seen the mixed signals. One day he's present, curious and warm. Next, he's vague, cold, and emotionally unavailable. You've tried to figure it out, maybe even adjust your energy to keep his attention. And now you're left somewhere in emotional limbo, caught between what was, what could have been, and what isn't happening. But here's what most people miss in these moments of confusion. The most powerful thing you can do is not decode his behavior, but redirect your energy. Because while you can't control his emotional capacity, his fears, or his internal conflict, you get to decide how much access he has to your mind, your time, and your emotional space. Let me say that again for the people in the back. You don't have to earn love, you embody it. You become the standard for how you're treated by how you treat yourself. The moment you shift your focus from trying to be chosen to being centered, the dynamic changes. He feels it. And that shift? It's magnetic. Let's talk about energy, because in relationships, it's everything. We often believe that attraction lives in our appearance, our effort, or our availability. But the truth is, energy is what speaks the loudest. Your energy either says, I need you to choose me so I can feel enough, or it says, I am enough, and I welcome what aligns with that. When your energy is grounded, confident, calm, and not reactive or performative, it creates contrast. Especially for a man who's used to women chasing, proving, or bending themselves to keep his attention. That contrast isn't just attractive, it's disarming. Because when a woman stands in her self-worth, she becomes a mirror. And mirrors are uncomfortable for emotionally avoidant men. Not because she's doing something wrong, but because she challenges his fear. She doesn't try to pull him closer when he pulls away. She doesn't panic when he goes quiet. She doesn't audition for love. She simply is. Now, let's be clear. This isn't about playing games. This isn't about pretending not to care or acting aloof. That's ego-based. And ego energy isn't sustainable. You can only fake being unbothered for so long before your heart starts screaming, why doesn't he see me? What we're talking about is real embodiment of worth. It's when you don't chase because you no longer need to. It's when you stop trying to force clarity from someone who thrives on confusion. It's when you stop seeing his inconsistency as a challenge and start seeing it as data. Data that says this person may feel something, but they don't have the capacity or courage to hold it right now. And you're no longer willing to self-abandon in exchange for temporary crumbs of connection. Let's get honest. How many times have you changed your tone, softened your standards, or ignored your intuition just to keep the vibe going? How many times have you silenced yourself to avoid pushing him away when really you were just suppressing your truth? And what did that get you? More confusion, less peace, a deeper attachment to someone who was never emotionally in to begin with. Here's the brutal truth. When you shrink yourself to be more digestible, the only thing you attract is someone who prefers you small. That's not love. That's emotional survival mode. And you're not here to survive love, you're here to receive it. So the game changes when you remember this. Real love doesn't require self-abandonment. It invites self-expression. And when you start moving with that truth, he feels it. You stop overanalyzing every message. You stop wondering why he viewed your story but didn't text back. You stop obsessing over what you could have said differently to keep his attention, because now your attention is back on you, on your peace, on your alignment, on what it feels like to breathe deeply in your own body without tying your worth to someone else's approval. And suddenly, you're glowing. Not because you changed your look, but because your energy is back where it belongs, on you. Now let's be real. That glow, that energy, it does something to him. He may not say it, but he notices. The silence gets louder for him when you stop filling it. The distance feels colder when you stop chasing. The absence starts to echo when you stop trying to prove your presence. That's when you live in his mind. Because now, you're not just someone he connected with. You're someone who held yourself with so much self-worth that I didn't know how to match it. That energy doesn't beg. It doesn't perform. It doesn't chase. It leads. So what happens next? For some men, that energy becomes the invitation to step up, to confront their fears, to meet you at your level. For others, it becomes a mirror they're not ready to face, and they disappear for good. Either way, you win. Because now you're no longer trapped in emotional uncertainty. You're no longer trying to extract clarity from someone who can't even offer it to himself. You've shifted from, why is he pulling away, to, does his energy align with mine? You've gone from, how do I get him to come back, to, do I even want this version of him? That shift, it's not just powerful, it's transformational. And let's be clear, this isn't about being cold or detached. It's about being rooted. Rooted in your worth, rooted in your truth, rooted in the kind of love that begins with how you love yourself. Because when you radiate that kind of calm, secure, self-contained energy, you don't just attract love, you elevate the entire dynamic. You stop being someone waiting to be chosen and start being someone who chooses. That's where your power lives. That's where your peace begins. Let's shift the focus for a moment. We've talked about your energy, your self-worth, and the importance of holding your center. Now, let's look at the other side of the equation, him. Because when a man pulls away, especially after moments of closeness, it's not always about manipulation or a lack of interest. In many cases, it's about emotional conflict, an internal battle between what he feels and what he fears. And understanding this doesn't mean you excuse or tolerate emotional inconsistency. It means you stop personalizing it. You stop thinking, what did I do wrong? And start seeing that his retreat isn't always a reflection of your value. It's often a reflection of his capacity. Here's the truth. Emotionally avoidant men often feel deeply, but those feelings don't bring them closer. They push them into panic mode. Let's break it down. Imagine a man who's always been in control of his emotions, his environment, and his relationships. Maybe he's had experiences in the past where getting close to someone ended in betrayal, loss, or emotional pain. Or maybe he simply grew up in a space where emotions were minimized, ridiculed, or avoided altogether. So now in adulthood, when he meets someone who awakens something real, something raw, his nervous system doesn't celebrate it. It alarms him. He might think, "I'm not ready for this. This is too much. If I fall, I'll lose myself. If I let her in, she'll see parts of me I don't even understand. What if I can't give her what she wants?" That's the voice of the avoidant mind, one that equates intimacy with risk, vulnerability with weakness, and closeness with potential chaos. So even if his heart is opening, his defense system is activating, and his go-to move? Distance. Here's where it gets tricky. This kind of man isn't trying to hurt you. He's trying to protect himself from emotions he doesn't yet know how to navigate. And the irony? The deeper he feels, the more he pulls away. Because emotions, for him, don't feel like a home. They feel like a threat. So when he experiences moments of deep connection with you, when the conversation gets intimate, when you start to feel like more than just a good time, when vulnerability creeps in, he doesn't lean closer. He retracts, not because it wasn't real, but because it was too real. Think of it this way. Emotional intimacy is like light. And for someone who spent most of their life in emotional shadow, that light doesn't feel safe. It feels blinding. So what does he do? He changes the subject when things get deep, disappears after an emotional moment, goes from hot to cold with no explanation, and retreats into himself just when you thought he was opening up. You're left confused, maybe even doubting yourself. But the truth is, you just triggered something he wasn't ready to confront. He may not know how to express it, but he feels it. That's the hallmark of the emotionally avoidant man. Conflicted behavior. When he's with you, it feels good. It feels real. It feels like connection. But when he's alone, the fear kicks in. The doubts rise. The urge to shut down takes over. And suddenly, you're experiencing the fallout of an emotional tug-of-war happening entirely within him. Now, this doesn't mean you stick around hoping he'll work it out. That's not your role. Your job isn't to be his therapist or his emotional anchor. Your job is to observe the pattern, not justify it. Because the longer you stay caught in someone else's emotional confusion, the more disconnected you become from your own emotional clarity. But understanding this dynamic can be freeing. It allows you to see that his silence isn't always disinterest. His withdrawal isn't always rejection. His hot and cold behavior isn't always a game. Sometimes, it's simply the byproduct of emotional fear. A fear that's louder than his desire. Let's talk about orbiting for a moment. You've probably seen it. He doesn't message you. He doesn't show up for real conversations. But he watches your stories, likes your photos, comments randomly, and sends a "Hey stranger" message when you've gone quiet. That's not a mistake. That's emotional checking in. His way of staying close enough to feel you, but far enough not to feel exposed. It's his version of emotional proximity without commitment. He's not reaching out to build. He's reaching out to maintain access. Because even though he's pulled back, he hasn't let go. You still live in his head. He just doesn't know what to do with the feelings you activate in him. So he hovers. But don't confuse that presence with action. Watching you isn't the same as choosing you. Lurking isn't the same as loving. His inability to walk away completely may be a sign of emotional attachment, but not necessarily emotional readiness. And this is where you come back into the picture. When you internalize his conflict, you start bending. You wait for breadcrumbs. You try harder to prove you're worth the effort. You lower your boundaries just to get a little more connection. You live in hope instead of clarity. But the moment you realize his distance is his, not yours to fix, everything shifts. You don't chase, you don't beg, you don't shrink, you observe, and you ask, does this behavior align with the kind of relationship I want? Because no matter how strong the connection feels, no matter how intense the chemistry, you're not here to wrestle someone into emotional availability. You're here for reciprocity. Here's what's most important to remember. Emotionally avoidant men don't lack emotion. They lack emotional safety and emotional tools. And while you may stir something in him that he wasn't ready for, that doesn't mean it's your job to wait around until he is. You can understand the fear. You can acknowledge the connection. You can see the struggle. But you still choose yourself, because love isn't just about feeling deeply, it's about showing up deeply. And if he can't do that, then no matter how real it felt, it's not enough. Let's ground ourselves in a powerful truth. Your worth is not determined by how someone else treats you. It's revealed by how you treat yourself. When they don't show up, that's the real test, isn't it? Not when he's leaning in, texting first, showing affection. But when he pulls away, when his energy shifts, when he goes cold, distant, and emotionally unavailable, that's the moment when many women start to crumble inward, overthinking, doubting, and shrinking. You start adjusting your tone. You tiptoe around your own needs. You overcompensate, hoping your effort will bring back his interest. But here's what you have to understand. Chasing consistency from someone who is emotionally inconsistent is not connection. It's self-abandonment. It's saying, I'm willing to betray my own peace if it means you'll validate me again. And that energy, it creates an invisible dynamic where you're reaching and he's retreating. Let's talk about boundaries, not as a defense mechanism, but as a declaration of self-worth. Because you can be soft and still have standards. You can be kind and still say no. You can be attracted to someone and still choose distance when they offer confusion. And if you've been dealing with someone who gives you hot and cold energy, breadcrumb communication, or emotionally reactive behavior, it's time to reset the tone, but not by lashing out, not by sending emotional essays, and definitely not by begging for clarity. You reset the tone by embodying this message. If you cannot meet me with emotional presence, I will meet myself with emotional protection. So what does that look like in action? It means when he disappears for days after a deep moment, you don't chase him with, did I do something wrong? You lean back. You protect your nervous system. You stop handing out emotional access to someone who can't offer consistency. Because here's what most people don't realize. Every time you respond to emotional inconsistency with emotional availability, you teach him that he can show up halfway and still be received fully. That's not love. That's an imbalance. Let's break this down even further. When a man is emotionally conflicted, what he needs is clarity. But what he's often given in past relationships is permission to linger in confusion. So when he meets a woman who doesn't chase, doesn't over-explain, doesn't panic in his absence, and doesn't beg for emotional scraps, it creates a pattern interrupt. And that interruption is powerful. He starts asking himself, why isn't she chasing me? Why does she feel so grounded? Why do I feel her energy even in her silence? And that's when something shifts in him. Not because you tried to change him, but because you stopped changing yourself for him. There's a massive difference between being available and being accessible. You can be emotionally available, open-hearted, honest, and authentic. But that doesn't mean you should always be emotionally accessible to someone who can't handle what they're activating in you. Availability is who you are. Accessibility is what you choose to give. And that choice should be based on consistency, safety, and reciprocity. Not intensity, not chemistry, not potential. Because a man who offers you moments but not momentum is not offering you a relationship. He's offering you a cycle. Now let's talk about your energy again. Because in these dynamics, your energy is everything. When you stay calm, composed, and centered in the face of inconsistency, you create a contrast he can't ignore. Not because you're playing a role, but because you're no longer reacting from a place of fear. You're responding from a place of self-trust. Your message is no longer there. Please choose me. It's I who choose peace. And anything that disrupts that doesn't get my energy. And the most powerful part? You're not doing it to get a reaction from him. You're doing it because you finally realize that you deserve to feel emotionally safe, seen, and chosen without having to sacrifice your dignity. Let's get practical. Here's what boundary setting looks like with someone who's giving you mixed signals. 1. Silence speaks. You don't respond instantly to someone who disappears and reappears without explanation. You observe. You pause. You protect your space before reacting emotionally. 2. Detachment without drama. You don't need an exit. You can slowly start pulling your energy back. Fewer texts, less emotional labor, more attention on your own life. 3. Direct clarity if needed. You don't chase answers, but if communication opens, you calmly express what you're available for. I value consistency. If that's not something you're in a place to offer, I completely respect that, but I also won't stay in a space that creates confusion for me. 4. Redirection of energy. Pour into your friendships, your purpose, your goals, not to distract yourself, but to recenter yourself. When you reconnect with your own life, you stop orbiting his. Now here's the thing. You don't need to be cold to be clear. You don't need to be mean to be unavailable. You don't need to be harsh to protect your heart. In fact, the most powerful boundary is one delivered with kindness, firmness, and calm energy. Because how you walk away matters. When you don't break character, when you don't fold under pressure, when you simply align with what feels true for you, you leave an emotional imprint far deeper than any dramatic exit ever could. And if he circles back, don't get excited by the contact. Pay attention to the consistency. One message after weeks of silence doesn't deserve your full emotional bandwidth. A man who's truly ready won't just reappear. He'll show up fully, consistently, and with intention. So if he can't meet you there, you release him gently, completely, powerfully. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally cared enough about yourself to stop settling. For less than clarity, commitment, and peace, let's talk about the quiet power of walking away. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Because when a man experiences the energy of a woman who doesn't chase, doesn't beg, and doesn't abandon herself to be chosen, he remembers her. Even if he walks away, even if he ghosts, even if it seems like he's moved on, your energy lingers. Not because of what you said, not because of how beautiful or kind you were, but because of how you held yourself when he pulled away. That kind of presence is rare, and rare is unforgettable. Let's be honest, most people expect a reaction. They expect you to get anxious, blow up their phone, ask what went wrong, and lower your standards just to keep the connection. Because that's the pattern. They've always known emotional inconsistency met with emotional overinvestment. So when you don't play that role, when you stay grounded, dignified, and emotionally sovereign, it creates emotional gravity. He might not admit it, he might not act on it right away, but he feels it. Because real feminine power doesn't chase, it attracts, then lets go if it's not honored. And that letting go echoes. Now, let's address the question many women quietly carry. If he felt something real, why did he still walk away? The answer is simple. Feeling something isn't the same as being ready for it. Men can feel deep emotion and still walk away if they lack emotional tools, fear vulnerability, aren't willing to face their own wounds, or can't offer consistent presence. It doesn't mean the connection wasn't real. It means he wasn't real with himself yet. And when a man hasn't done the emotional work to hold the kind of relationship he wants, you become a mirror, not a match. He sees what's possible through you. But if he hasn't built the internal foundation to meet it, he'll retreat. Not because you were too much, but because you reflected what he wasn't ready to become. Here's what you need to understand deeply. You are not unforgettable because you were available. You're unforgettable because you are authentic and willing to walk away when you weren't met there. And that choice? That's what separates you from every woman who's tolerated half love and hopes it would turn into more. It's not your softness that makes you magnetic. It's the fact that your softness is protected by strength. You can love deeply, but you can also leave peacefully. That combination, unmatched. Let's shift into something even more important. What does emotional readiness actually look like in a man? Because attraction isn't enough, connection isn't enough, chemistry isn't enough. Readiness is about consistency over intensity, clarity over confusion, action over promises, emotional safety over romantic highs. Here's how a man who is ready shows up. 1. He doesn't create confusion. If you're constantly wondering where you stand, you already have your answer. A ready man brings clarity, not chaos. 2. He initiates and maintains. You're not the only one driving the connection. He reaches out, he follows up, he invests emotionally and mentally, not just physically. 3. He moves with intention. He doesn't breadcrumb, he doesn't orbit. He doesn't test the waters. He knows what he wants, and he moves toward it without playing games. 4. He regulates his emotions. He's not reactive, hot and cold, or emotionally avoidant. If something triggers him, he communicates instead of withdrawing. 5. He values your emotional safety. He listens. He adapts. He pays attention to how you feel, not just how you look or how fun you are when you're happy. That's real masculine leadership. And until you meet a man who can offer that, don't lower your standards for someone who only offers sparks without structure. Now here's the most important reminder of all. The man who is truly meant for you will not be afraid of your depth. He will be ready for it. He won't run from your softness. He won't disappear after intimacy. He won't retreat when you open your heart. Instead, he'll meet you in presence, in peace, in partnership. Because a real relationship isn't about passion, it's about emotional resilience. It's about two people who can hold the fire and the stillness. So what now? You don't wait, you don't chase, you don't live in emotional limbo hoping he comes back ready. You rise. You protect your peace. You nurture your joy. You stay open but not available to inconsistency. Because the more you hold your standards with grace, the more you signal to the universe and to every man watching that you are no longer accessible to confusion, only to clarity, only to consistency, only to reciprocity. And until someone can meet you there, you remain full on your own. That's the essence of feminine power. That's what keeps you unforgettable. That's the energy that stays in his mind long after your absence becomes undeniable. Let's take a breath. You've walked through the confusion. You've sat in the silence. You've pulled your energy back from someone who couldn't meet you. And now you're here, not seeking revenge, not waiting on closure, but reaching for reconnection with yourself. That's the real destination. Not him, not the relationship, you. Because this whole time it was never about fixing him or figuring him out. It was about finding you again. Let's be honest about what these situations can do to you. They drain your emotional energy. They shake your sense of safety. They make you question your instincts even when your intuition is screaming the truth. That's not love. That's emotional erosion. And healing from it doesn't come from rebound validation, pretending to be unbothered, or jumping into a new connection. It comes from doing something radical in a world that glorifies chasing, choosing yourself over and over until you feel whole again. Here's the truth that hurts and heals. The version of you that tolerated emotional inconsistency is not broken. She was surviving. She believed love had to be earned. She thought being easygoing would make her more lovable. She confused emotional intensity with emotional intimacy. But now you know better. You've tasted your own peace. You've witnessed your own power. You've remembered that love isn't something to chase. It's something to receive when the foundation is safe. Let's talk about what it really means to become the woman you don't walk away from. It means you don't abandon yourself to keep someone else comfortable. You don't shrink your needs to avoid rocking the boat. You don't silence your standards to stay chosen. Instead, you stay close to your truth, loyal to your boundaries, and rooted in your worth. Because when you do that, something miraculous happens. You stop fearing abandonment because you're no longer abandoning yourself. That's the shift. That's the healing. That's the new standard. Let's rewrite the story. You are no longer the woman who waits on text to feel validated, tries to decode mixed signals, or accepts halfway love because he might change. You are now the woman who brings her full self to the table, expects clarity, not confusion, and attracts emotionally available men because she is emotionally anchored herself. And when someone doesn't show up fully, you don't rage, you don't chase, you don't shrink. You exit gracefully. Not because you're heartless, but because you're finally heart-aligned. Now, let's close with this. Healing isn't a linear path. You might miss him. You might have dreams about him. You might still wonder what if. That's okay. Missing someone isn't a sign to go back. It's a reminder of your capacity to love. But loving someone and choosing yourself are not in conflict. You can do both because healing doesn't always look like indifference. It often looks like self-respect in the presence of lingering love. You feel it, you honor it, and you still move forward. Let this be your new love standard. I don't chase love. I align with it. I don't beg for consistency. I require it. I don't confuse chemistry for commitment. I don't shrink to fit. I expand and wait for someone who matches that expansion. You're not hard to love. You were just asking to be loved by someone not yet capable of meeting you there. And now you're done auditioning. To the woman who stayed too long, gave too much, and forgot herself in someone else's confusion. You didn't fail. You learned. You awakened. You rose. Now the love story begins again. Not with him, with you. The most powerful relationship you'll ever have is with the woman in the mirror. Choose her every day and let every future connection rise to that level or not enter at all.